Welcome to an exploration of the power of a graceful leader tenets with Truett Tate. Truett and I are here to explore each tenet in a conversational, reflective, and relatable way. Truett is a global leader, an influencer, and a coach. I am the author of A Power of a Graceful Leader, Thompson. We would love for you to join us in this fun and easily digestible journey into infusing our lives and work with grace. Hi, this is Lexy and Truett here with you, and we're getting ready to deep dive and have an exploration of the 6 tenets of A Power of a Graceful Leader. And the journey will be 30-minute episodes dripped out over every week for 7 weeks, including this episode. And we're just going to dive in a conversational but relatable way to explore what grace is and how to align it to your life and your leadership and just have a really good time together. So I'm going to turn it over to Truett, and welcome, Truett. Thanks for being here with me.
As always, thanks, and good morning to you, Alexis.
Thank you.
It's interesting. I feel a bit of mixed emotions as we finish what has been a journey together. I mean, quite honestly, 6 podcasts in as many months, and I think that I've probably learned as much, if not more, than I feel that I've contributed through that. And I'm not sure there's probably just as much one as a part of the other, but as I really reflect on it, Alexis, you've been such a, what's the best word, treat as a partner. You know, you're part journalist, part interviewer, observer, but at the same time, and it's probably even more important to me, friend, and I think I have to admit, a bit of a confidant. So I love this idea that we create a bit of an introduction to the series. You know, if you're going to share a little bit about the book and the podcasts, what they mean to you, and I'd love to share my perspective on why I read the book in the first place and what it's meant to me. And maybe through that, we can both give some tips about how folks might approach getting the most out of both the book and the series of our conversations. So I don't know. Do you want to start?
Sure, I'll start. And I want to, one of the things I've been working on the past couple of years is the ability to receive. And that was a lot of love. And thank you.
Yeah.
It's a challenge, right, to receive the good stuff in life. And but it creates balance, right? If we're giving, we need receiving as part of the process. So thank you for that very much. And so the story about A Power of a Graceful Leader, the truth is it got written over a decade's time with client interfaces, anecdotes, and patterns, which is one of the gifts that I have, that I would see in leaders of either gaps that were missing or things that leaders were doing on rinse and repeat, whether it was conscious or not, and coming up with some pretty amazing successes around people, results, and impact, because that's what I really care about. So when I would step back from that, and fortunately and unfortunately, COVID gave us all a pregnant pause.
Yeah.
So that was when I took all the parts and pieces, and I hired a team to help me do that because I'd never written a book before, right? And I'm not an editor, I'm a writer, and there's a distinct difference between those two tasks. And so in doing that, it was a really beautiful way to take 2.5 decades of my work and put it in a place that felt appropriate, and it felt timeless. And when I say that, I mean the tenets, like, for example, there's lots of great books that I've read, and many of them are still on my shelf behind me. And in that process, what made it a great book was because I could put it down, read it, put it down for a decade, dust my shelf, go, oh, there's that book, right? Pick it back up, reread it or skim it, and have a whole new experience with the contents of that book. And that was really important to me with the tenets of a graceful leader, because we are evolving creatures. And so who I am and the tenet that speaks to me today is going to be potentially extremely different than the one in 3 to 5, 10 years from now. And I'm proud to say, I think we accomplished that when we put this book, the way we put the book together. And it also is the words that I get, even in the AI description of my book, which is on Amazon now, is that it's relatable, right? It's easy to digest. It takes what could feel like lofty theory and philosophy and boils it down into, hey, we're all human beings, and how can we put these things into action in our own lives? And that's a skill I have in my coaching practice. And so I'm really happy it translated in the book. So this is really, the book is really just a place to introduce this concept of grace into the work environment. If you're have a practicing religion or faith, you've probably heard it in that context many different ways. And I just think it's time, and kind of the next evolution right after servant and situational leadership and conscious leadership, where there's this place in our body that involves our heart chakra and our solar plexus, and it makes up this grace center. And so often people would be able to say, I know what it feels like, but I don't know really how to tell you about it. And that was the evidence that we're fine tuning some of the resources we have as humans with our bodies. And maybe it was time to bring that part of us to work. And that's really the intention of all of this, to change the conversation. And I'd love to hear your reflection of that.
Well, as always, I love so much what you shared there. I'm not sure I ever told you that the first I heard about you was through one of the members at TLC, and they were so excited about a podcast that you had done with the CEO and the founder of TLC, right? Again, Power. And of course, as you know, I'm the TLC chairman, and a huge fan of Gien. I mean, talk about a great storyteller.
Oh, yeah.
So I picked up on it right away. And so I first listened to the podcast, and I was so taken by the dynamic. I loved the messaging, and in particular, I loved the way that you engaged with the guest. That led me to pick up your book, The Power of the Graceful Leader, and that became one of my favorite bedside books. And kind of, I don't think I waited 10 years to dust the shelf, but and don't ask me about my bedside stand. I think a more eclectic stack you probably won't ever find. But I truly enjoyed reading your book, and would have to say that I found your genuine commitment to helping people on their journey of self-awareness. I found it inspiring. And then when you reached out and asked me to do that first podcast, I was both flattered and excited. And of course, you didn't let me down. I truly felt that we were having a chat, not a series of pre-planned questions that you had written the night before. You were listening to what I said. You're digesting it. You kind of formed a response live. Sometimes it was a question. Sometimes you expanded on what I said. I think people will see that. And sometimes you challenged it. And I love that. So when you came up with the idea of doing a series of 6 to cover the 6 tenets, I think you remember I leapt to the opportunity. I must say, though, my guess is that there will probably be as many different approaches to how people will consume this series as there are people. My wife, I think I mentioned you, she loves to listen to the podcast when she walks the dog. My business partner, she tends to binge listen. Both women inspire me. Each has their own way to take it all in. And that's the important part, how they then reflect on it. And I think it was Edmund Burke who said, reading without reflection is like eating without digestion. What's the purpose? Whatever approach you take, though, I think that people need to carve out the time to reflect on it all. What does it mean for me? How might I approach things differently as a result of what I've just heard? You and I, Alexis, we don't present these talks as though we're doling out knowledge. We don't have all the answers. But I think that through our exchanges, I'm hoping that someone picks up on a strand that resonates with them. We talk about experiences, and people identify from time to time with experiences. We aren't stating rules or giving advice. We're encouraging people to think about those things and potentially unlock a perspective that I actually think can be life-changing. I think about one of the themes that cuts through a lot of our conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I would highlight along life's journeys that people need not just to reflect, but to take time to observe. You know, we talked about it, to
Mm-hmm.
see the miracles, to see beauty, to see magic and wonder. We tend to think about those things in terms of nature,
Mm-hmm.
but I think it's really important that people understand it in terms of leadership.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing maybe more important than a follower to think that the leader sees them.
Yeah.
Really is taking the time to see the potential,
Mm-hmm.
to see what makes them special,
Mm-hmm.
um, and cares.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's easy to think about observing nature, but leadership is about observing people. And a follower, when they see that, will follow passionately.
Yeah.
Um, and so whether it's that strand or another strand, I think our hope is that we might just unlock something that
Mm-hmm.
can be life changing for the readers and our observers who are on their own journey to being better,
Mm-hmm.
more powerful leaders. It's exciting.
It is really exciting, and I do want to offer you a reflection that I haven't yet. Is that my daughter also produces the podcast after the fact, so that's part of what she does in the world, and so she's been on this journey obviously with me for a long time. And I found her watching our podcast, not just editing them. She watched them all,
Oh,
and
really?
I asked her, I was like, I see you rewinding and watching from a listening perspective, not from an editing perspective. And she's like, I love the two of you together. And she's like, Mom, I've heard things with you with Truett that I didn't even know about you. And Truett gave me some really good tips, and I'm using this as a way to lead my life because she doesn't lead other people currently. But she's like, if I can be the leader of my own life, that's enough. And I was like, absolutely.
Yeah,
And
right.
yeah, and one of the tips that she really appreciated in one of the podcasts was you shared the things that aren't my strengths, where I perceive that I have a gap. Those are the places that I put systems and structure in place. And she immediately took that feedback and has implemented it with like amazing results in a short time.
Wow.
So I already know it. I already know the way that we connect. And also the other thing, and I think I have shared this with you, is when I look at the podcast, the first podcast that I did with 11 different people, you and I get the biggest hits. I don't know if it's a chemistry thing or you're just this famous person, or I don't know what it
No.
is. You know
Well,
what I'm
we know
saying?
it isn't that. We
Yeah.
know it isn't that.
But it's interesting that there's something there. About our synergy together, and I'm honored to receive it and be a part of it, and really just I've had so much fun, and I
Me too.
actually have learned a lot in my journey with you as well. Just the way you are in the world and some of those things that I'd like to incorporate more in how I am in the world. So it's been a
Well,
lovely journey. So thank
that's been
you.
mutual. So
Yeah.
I think in concept, what we're going to do for folks now is
Yeah.
maybe a few simple excerpts just to give folks a sense,
Mm-hmm.
kind of what each of those chats might be about. I don't particularly, and I didn't test this with you. I don't
Mm-hmm.
think there needs to be a particular order,
Nope.
and that might be really helpful for some folks. Maybe through listening to some of the clips, they'll decide they want to start on one versus another.
Absolutely.
Hopefully, what you and I both believe we put into this will sink a hook,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of where they dive in, and
Mm-hmm.
they'll want to listen to more. And then I strongly recommend to all of them, as listeners, if you're like me, after you listen to the podcast, you'll want to go to the book.
Mm-hmm.
And when you go to the book, that will, I'm a right in the margin guy. I'm a little bit
Mm-hmm.
highlight guy. Um, but if you have that bit of a realization or even an epiphany,
Mm-hmm.
the next part's important, because if if you think it works for you, then it actually takes some work. It's funny you point out what your daughter said, because I'm a fan of unless some of this was taught to you by your parents.
Yeah.
If it's a matter of kind of a dawning or an
Mm-hmm.
epiphany, then it takes some work and it takes some discipline
Yeah.
to nurture it
Mm-hmm.
and then refine it
Mm-hmm.
and then let it be natural. But
Yeah.
that isn't a flip of the switch thing.
No. Time served. And
Okay.
the school of hard knocks plays a little bit. I mean, grace is gritty, right? And that's part of it, is the grittiness or the refining of oneself, and the knowing of oneself. Grit evolves to grace, or into a pearl, or however you want
I like it.
to say that.
Yeah.
But it's really true. And there's also, this body of work, just to share, there is a Power of a Graceful Leadership cohort that I run a couple of times a year. Someone wanted to get in that way. We are just, one of the growth things I was talking to you before we hit record is I beta tested, and now I'm ready to go into full production, where we do a train the trainer for graceful conversations inside of organizations. So we teach the people to fish, and they own it for the organization. So you're not hiring a consultant and they put a desk in your office and they're there forever. Not that. So there's lots of ways you can interface. I also did record an Audible. So if you prefer to hear it, that's how I do it. I take a book in on audio. If I find it worth it, then I buy the book. So we all do it different ways. And I think that was a great example of sharing that about the two most important women in your life, on the daily basis. Yeah. So it's all good. There's lots of ways to interface. That you'll find throughout here, we're going to put excerpts of the podcast. So just stay with us as we'll take you through them. And just a quick overview of the tenets. We have the integrating tenet. We have evolving tenet. We have the transparency tenet. We have connecting self and the universe tenet, co-creation, which is innovation, and compassionately powerful. And Truett's absolutely right. You take it in whatever order it calls you. So when I'm working with this book with my coaching clients, they read the book and then they tell me what they want. So there is this calling into, right? Like you don't have to do anything, but it's probably very well served if you'll just tune into your own inner being and just ask yourself, where do I want to go with this? And pick one and start there. And that might be all you ever do. That's okay. This is not a linear process, which is another part that I learned through the PGL cohort. Is I work with a lot of technical people, and they're linear by nature, engineers, physicians, surgeons, right? Very science focused. And this isn't that. This is a spiral. In its best case, it's moving in one direction, but in other cases, it's moving in reverse direction and collapses on itself. So it is the experience of diving into your own inner universe and learning to trust and know whose voice you're hearing when you're in there with yourself, so that you can make really aligned, integrous, and intentional decisions about the life you want to live and the people that are in your stead if you are actually in a leadership role. So, yeah.
I think you wrapped it up beautifully.
Okay.
We're wrapping up an intro for folks.
Yeah.
I think that this thing brought me great joy, and I think both Alexis and I,
Yeah.
to all of you who have been with us, I hope it brings joy to you as well.
Yeah. Stay with us. We're going to put the clips in following. And thank you for being here. Thank you, Truett, so much.
Equally. Bye-bye.
So I would love to hear what your mission, vision, or purpose is in your life right now, Truett.
Okay, we get right into it, don't we?
Yeah, we're going for it.
Well, I think part of that response, and I'm about to go right in the face. I normally, when I do some coaching, in particular to junior folks, answer the question directly and then expand.
Okay,
I'm
great.
going to cheat on that a little and do a tiny expansion, and then I'll do my best. But as you just suggested in the way you teed this up, we're all on a journey. You say it very well in your book. Your mission, your vision of what your purpose is and why you're on the earth and why I'm on the earth, it changes over time. It changes as a function of your experiences, and it changes as you get to know yourself, which improves with time.
So, Truett, could you share with us a little bit about your journey, about what that distinction is or isn't for you, and your journey along how your egoic self and your faithful servant soul self connect or integrate or align for you? Yeah,
I love the straightforward question. Yes.
There you go.
Okay. I guess let me take it from a sense of the journey without eating up our full 30 minutes. We did talk about it a little bit the first time we talked, and getting to know yourself is a journey and it takes time. I think in a funny way for me, I'm very fortunate. I'll say that anytime in every episode we get. I think all my life was kind of leading to, not in a straight line, but to this confluence of things, which is where this little story will end, which has kind of made the last 15 years of my life so much more clear.
We're going to start digging into the transparency tenet. And this is one that, I'm curious to be in this conversation with you, because it's often the first one that emerging leaders are struggling with. Like transparency, I call it appropriateness, because what your transparency is with your mom and what your transparency is with your wife or husband or partner, and then what it is with the people that report to you, that's a big stretch, right? There's a swing in there about appropriateness, because what we would say in one area or experience or show up as, maybe even some of our behaviors, aren't necessarily appropriate in another place that we're at. And so, it's one of those things when we get to transparency, I often hear the saying of, I was just being honest, or, but they're hurting you while they're being honest, or, that's just how I am. I can't help it. That's just who I am. And so when you're emerging in leadership, part of the nuance of it, I have found, and why it's a staple of the tenets here in Graceful Leadership, is understanding your audience, being able to energetically get in tune with where everybody is, and not just live in this head, which knows all things, but to really drop into body and heart. So you're using all three of those resources to discern, oh, this is a place to talk about this safely, or this isn't a place to talk about that safely, or it doesn't add value, or whatever.
I just went to the Design Museum in London, which, by the way, is fabulous, there by Holland Park. And he's quoted, but I love the simplicity of a quote, and you can see how this ends up being a nice toast with friends. Eventually, everything is connected. People, objects, ideas. But it's the quality of the connection which determines beauty, value, and meaning, right? So everything's connected, but the quality of the connection, that takes it to a whole nother level. So in a way, maybe because I feel that quite strongly, saying that we're all connected, for me, is a little bit of a shrug. Yeah. Yes, of course. But what's kind of cool is that Eames takes it to that next place, and that caring about the connection. And literally with all three of those things, caring about the quality of the connection with people, caring about the quality of the connection with our planet, with ideas. The idea of making sure that any organization, and we can reduce it to two people who are trying to move any idea forward, making sure that we aren't locked into the same old thinking and the same old approach, which, as the adages go, will give you the same result, is critical.
How do you end up doing that? I think for me, I'm always a bit of a blend between how to use structure, how to use discipline, um, and I think that there's enough chaos in the world. It's up to us to put order to it, and in that sense, I think what you need to do is build into any organization a process by which you make sure that you open up any idea and any question to challenge.
Mhm. So it's the compassionately powerful tenet, and it's with all things. It's with people, it's with ideas, it's all things, not just the people, which is a default thing. And I want to dig in because both words carry their own weight, and why I chose them was extremely intentional. Um,
I can imagine.
so I'm going to start with the powerful piece because that's how it started for me. So typically when I was growing up in the world, I had a lot of male leaders. I was in a sales role much of my early career. I always wanted to be the top performer, who I usually was. However, it came with a lot of force. And I realized that as I got older, that force had a cost, right? There was an impact and cost that early in my career I didn't understand. Then I didn't really care because I was getting results.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had to do some reckoning with as I got older.